Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliott Rearing, and Jacob Tissett with you here. The biggest rivalry in all of sports coming up this weekend, Ohio State, Michigan, a noon kick. For our ESPN listeners in Dayton, of course, we are Dayton's radio home for Ohio State football. 10:30 coverage begins. Walking you right up to kickoff at noon, of course. And our next guest who's played in this game, who will be at the game coming up on Saturday and is itching to witness the Buckeyes put an end to that Cheaters up north winning streak that they have over the Buckeyes at this point. One of the all-time greats to ever do it, put on a Buckeye jersey, College Football Hall of Famer, Mr. Keith Byars, hanging out with us. Keith, it's been a whole 24 hours since I've seen you, but welcome back. How are you?
Yes,
Good morning.
Hey, good morning. I'm doing good this day. You guys, you're doing good. I'm listening to some of these shows. Y'all getting after it. Pretty good. Nice.
No, this is a tame show.
This
is a tame show. They're not like Kev lets me get away with some of my hot takes. They don't. So there's a little resistance from time to time.
That's good. A little pushback every once in a while.
So we were talking about your career before you came on a little bit ago. I shared with them we're doing our Buckeye pregame show this past Saturday, Ohio State getting set for Indiana. And, there's the awkward little, we're talking, we look up, the TVs are up in the bar, and there's the 30 for 30 highlighting Doug Flutie's Heisman. And, you said, hey, turn that off, what is going on? But I said, yeah, that nothing, just a little awkward moment, Flutie celebrating the Heisman. You were on the screen, too. You had to fake a smile as he's hoisting up the trophy.
I know. They should give me an Academy Award for that one.
But
I gave a little golf clap at the end. I shook his hand. I'm like, oh, man.
And
I've been scarred for 40 years. That was 40 years ago, 1984. So I haven't watched the Heisman Trophy ceremony since. I just can't watch it anymore. I have PTSD. I just can't handle it. Nope. Don't want to see it because they didn't call my name that Saturday evening. I was just waiting, and they didn't call my name. They called the wrong name. So I can't watch it no more.
Well, one thing you will be watching this Saturday, Ohio State, Michigan, of course. And I know you have all the takes in the world about this matchup, but how painful has it been the last 3 years to watch not just Ohio State lose to Michigan, but then to know that the way Michigan's been winning over the last 3 years has basically been just circled around the cheating scandal that has dominated the talking points of all of college football for the last couple of years. Seems like a clean slate this year. Obviously, Michigan not as good as in years past, but this is the year that Ohio State's licking their chops. They're wanting to put up 100 on Michigan on Saturday. Your thoughts heading into this matchup?
Well, I totally agree. I mean, it's been a long 3 years, and I can't do a fourth year. And the thing about the Ohio State-Michigan game, it's always been a very physical game. It's been, when I played in it, it was the most physical game on the schedule, but it also was the cleanest game. It was the hardest hitting, everything. In the last 3 years, we've simply been out-hit. And, you may beat an Ohio State team, but you don't out-hit them. You kind of maybe matches. But the last 3 Michigan games, we've been just simply, been beat up. Last year, I think Michigan went for it on 4th down 3 times and ran the ball and got all 3 times. That's just being out physical. That was last year and the year before that and the year before that. And now this year, it's time to turn the page, tell a new story. And the table is set for us to do what we're supposed to do. We control our own destiny. Ever since the loss to Oregon, everybody has been pointing to, well, we don't have to scoreboard watch it. We just go out there and win. And we just need to go out here and win on Saturday. And I'm going to be in the building. I'm glad you called me today on Tuesday because I have a voice. Become Sunday and Monday, I plan on not having much voice because I'm going to let it all explode there at Ohio Stadium Saturday at 12 o'clock.
Oh, 100%, Keith. And you said the physicality has been the biggest concern for Ohio State the last 3 years. That's absolutely correct. And with the O-line injuries for Ohio State coming into this game and the defensive line for Michigan with Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham being one of their strong suits, are you concerned at all that could bleed into this 4th year in a row? The O-line with Hinsman back at center looked good against Indiana, but a different task going up against this Wolverine front this weekend. How concerned are you about that offensive line and the new pieces in there?
Well, I'm concerned about both sides of the line of scrimmage, because that's where the game is always won in the trenches. And Michigan's only way they can beat us is by ball control, keeping the ball between 35 and 40 minutes, maybe even 45 minutes of the game. Keep our offense on the sideline watching while they take these slow, methodical drives, 3 yards here, 2 yards there, 6 yards there, first down, all that kind of stuff. We can't allow that on Saturday. And that's what they think right now. If you're Michigan, why wouldn't you think it? If you've been a part of the Michigan team the last 3 years, you won the battle of the trenches, you gotta believe that, it can happen again until proven otherwise. And then you're on the other side of the ledger, Ohio State, you gotta be tired of hearing it about losing to them and how we've lost to them, and all that goes away this Saturday if you handle your business. I was telling Justin this summer, I went to practice, talked to some of the players, and I remember pulling JT to him aloud to the side, and we just had to talk about the Michigan game. And I said, "You've been here 3 years and you haven't beaten them." And I said, when November gets here, this was back in August. I said, when November gets here, you will have a chance to do it, and you go in your career on a high note by beating Michigan. You beat Michigan in November, those other 3 losses will go so far distant memories, and you're leaving your career on a high note. So they've been hearing it from various sources all over the years, through the 3 years, and it culminates to Saturday. Winning the battle in the trenches. Michigan did it last year. They lost their starting offensive lineman in the Ohio State game. Next guy up, and they didn't miss a beat. So our offensive line, they have got to be dominant, and so is the defensive line. We have got to harass them, and make them beat us with their arm. They have no passing game. So the only way they can win is by running the football and controlling the clock. So we just cannot simply allow that to happen.
You talk about JTT there. He wasn't the only one. A lot of seniors came back for their last season with the Buckeyes this year to try to avenge those 3 losses. Jack Sawyer talked about it right after the Indiana game, said he's not going to think about this win for even a second, turning the page to game week right away. How much does it mean for those seniors to leave Ohio State with at least one pair of gold pants?
Oh, it means a ton. Because when we get together, the brotherhood get together from guys from different eras, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. We're sitting around, we could be at a golf tournament, and, just shooting the breeze and like, how'd you do against Michigan? And you don't want to be the guy to say, I never beat them. And there's a few guys that I've been around, they never beat Michigan. I'm like, wow, it's your whole career and you didn't beat Michigan? That's tough. Better you than me. Then you got other guys like Archie Griffin. I never lost to Michigan. I'm like, dang, I wish I could say that. Josh Perry, I never lost to Michigan. Wish I could say that, but hey, I did beat him. So, that's how big it is. And I was telling, JT, you'll remember this 40 years later. Here I am 40 years later since my last victory over Michigan, and it feels like yesterday. Even just talking to you right now, I'm getting a little goosebumps. I think I could suit up and play Saturday, maybe 1 or 2 snaps. It will stay with you for the rest of your life. I talked to guys, much older than myself. Former linebacker in the 60s named Ike Kelly. Ike played at Ohio State in the mid-60s. And, you mentioned Ohio State, Michigan to him. I'm like, that's what I'm talking. I'm going to be you one day, Ike. Somebody, kicking 80 in the behind, and you mentioned Ohio State, Michigan game to me. I'm going to get, be, bulked up, ready to go play. I have an 8-month-old grandson. And every time I hold him and whisper in his ear, I tell him, you can't go to Michigan. Your college is going to be Ohio State or Purdue because your dad went there. But you think about going to Michigan, you will be out of the wheel. And he's 8 months old and don't really know what I'm talking about. But that's how deep it is with Ohio State, the love for Ohio State and the hate for Michigan is.
Now, KB, you talk about that. You're telling your 8-month-old grandson, do not go to Michigan. Who was telling you not to go to Michigan? Because, you were close. It took a legend at Ohio State to convince you. Share that story when you were trying to decide where you were going to play your college days.
That's true. I mean, when you're 17, 18 years old, you think you got a lot of answers, but then you run into somebody, who's better adept at it. And I had a phone call during my recruiting process from Bo Schembechler, the Michigan, great coach. And he wanted to come sit in my living room and have a meeting with me because the recruiter had, sent me all kind of paraphernalia. So I take the meeting, and I just, how do you turn down Bo Schembechler? Even though you hate him, he's the enemy, he's on the other sideline. I'm thinking I'm going to get some inside information. So he comes over to my house here in Dayton, Ohio, and 2 hours later, he sits in my living room and goes to talking. And next thing I know, I'm taking a recruiting visit to Michigan. I'm like, this is not a fair fight. What has this guy got over me? And I go to Michigan and, have my first, official recruiting visit. And then shortly thereafter, I get a phone call from the legendary Woody Hayes. He calls my house, and my sister answered the phone. She said, keep telephone, is Woody Hayes on the phone? And I'm like, get out of here. She's playing tricks on me. Woody Hayes is not even a coach. Why is he calling me? And I pick up the phone, and it's Woody Hayes. And, I know it's either Woody Hayes or a great imposter, which if you grew up in Ohio, you know what Woody Hayes' voice sounds like. And Woody Hayes proceeds to cussing me out. I heard you went to Michigan. Don't you want to be great? Yeah. He said, all great players stay in Ohio. And then he, a few more words is not fit for, public consumption. It was like, I'm talking to Woody Hayes and he's cursing me out. I said, well, I'm coming up there in 2 weeks for my visit. Well, I want to meet you. Sir, I want to meet you too. And so I visit Ohio State. I go to lunch that weekend with just myself, Earl Bruce, and Woody Hayes. And we're sitting at the old Highlight, one of Woody Hayes' favorite restaurant. And it's just us three. And Woody dominated the conversation. And I knew I was coming to Ohio State right then. I always wanted to be a Buckeye, but when you're 17, 18 years old, you get a lot of recruits from all the world. Everybody's telling you you're the best thing since sliced bread, and you kind of like start feeling yourself a little too much. But that afternoon with Woody and Earl, I knew for a doubt. I was like, this is home. I'm coming to Ohio State. And it was just a time that I would never, ever forget. Being 4 years at Ohio State and being around Woody Hayes all 4 years while I was there. I was like, that's, Woody Hayes. Bo Schembechler worked for Woody Hayes. But Woody didn't work for Bo. I got to go to Ohio State over Michigan. And that was one of the many reasons why, I went to Ohio State. But, Woody Hayes, him and Archie Griffin, all that, they helped seal the deal to make me a Buckeye.
Buckeye fans are very lucky you chose Ohio State, one of the best to ever wear scarlet and gray. And Ohio State has two pretty good backs there right now, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson. We've seen this story with the Michigan game year after year now. The two running back system has been the Achilles heel of Ohio State, Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum over the last few years. How can Ohio State use these two special backs and turn the page and beat Michigan the way Michigan has beaten us the last few years?
Well, like we said earlier, it starts up front with the offensive line. But even really before it starts with Chip Kelly and Ryan Day. They have got to do their best coaching job. I've heard Chip Kelly read some of his quotes throughout the year, and he said he waits to the defense, see what they're giving us, and then we attack that area. I don't necessarily agree with that philosophy, because you see how we start off slow a lot of the times in these games, and then we pick it up as the game goes on. We're being more reactionary. I want to see us be the aggressor and tell defenses, you can't stop us, and this is why. So we come out and line up, what we want to do, what we want to get out. They got to, adjust to us instead of us always adjusting to them, and keep the pressure on. I mean, just like simple math right now, you only got 11 people on defense. And when we put Emeka Mbuka and Jeremiah Smith on the same side, you get 5 defensive backs in the game. You're going to double team both of those guys and leave Cardell Tate wide open, and you're going to think a linebacker's going to cover our tight end or our backs out of the backfield. We already have the numbers. If you throw the ball to Travion or Quinshon Judkins in space, they're going to win 99 out of 100. Now you want to try to double team both for Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Mbuka? No. With who? Another defensive back. Now that even opens up even more running lanes. So I said all that to say we would run the ball better by passing first and then getting to the running game instead of trying to do offline runs that we run. Sometimes it's almost like give up. So we keep the pressure on them from the beginning. And we do that. Michigan doesn't have enough answers for us. Next thing you know, in the first quarter, we have 14 points at least. And then once we get in that third quarter and we get up 3 scores, and then use Katie bar the door, then I want to beat them by 50 to 60 points and try to score 100. That's how you do it. Do the little things early and often, and then Michigan threw the ball, I think 30-something times last week, and they still didn't throw for 200 yards. They can't throw their way back in the game. All we got to do is get up 10, 14 points, it's over. And then then the route comes on. I may even storm the field on Saturday with my old behind.
I'll be right there with you. I'll
I
be
want
right
to
there
see
with
it.
you.
Yes.
You mentioned his name. I have to ask the question. Jeremiah Smith, freshman, just came into Ohio State this year, and he's having the best freshman wide receiver season in the history of the program. Broke the receptions, yards, and touchdowns record. Just how good is number 4?
Oh, I think he's as good as advertised, maybe even better than advertised, because now he's getting the opportunity, and that's one of the keys to being great as a freshman, having the opportunities to go out there and do that. You look at just in recent history. I won't go over all Ohio State history, but look at Marvin Harrison Jr. He caught 6 passes in his first 12 games at Ohio State, and he caught 6 in the Rose Bowl and 3 touchdowns. How special would he have been as a freshman if he had opportunities? But he came into the team that already had Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson
Right.
Smith and Jigba. So it wasn't a lot of opportunities for him. So it's about timing. Jeremiah Smith comes in at the right time where there's more spaces available for him to come in early and often and make plays. So, but all that timing helps. So Jeremiah Smith as a freshman, I think he would be probably our first 3-time All-American wide receiver. Because if he's not first-team All-American this year, I want to know I don't know how many they picked, 2 or 3. I need to know who the 2 or 3 other first-team All-Americans in this country have played better than him. I just simply have not seen it.
I haven't seen it either. And we know how good Jeremiah is, and Mika Ibuka out there as well. Carnell Tate, highly recruited for sure. But you can have the best wide receivers in the world. If you don't have a quarterback that can get him the football, they're no good. And Will Howard came in from the transfer portal this year from Kansas State with not a ton of expectations. I think everyone kind of unanimously thought he was just going to be a facilitator, get the ball to the playmakers. Will Howard has been unbelievable since he got to Columbus. He's protecting the football. He's completing his passes. How much has his buying into the system, buying into the culture, being a true leader of this team while also playing quarterback, how much has that meant to this locker room?
Well, for Will Howard, this is the most talented team he's ever been on in his life.
Right.
Not in high school, he didn't have much talent. And then a Kansas State talent and Ohio State talent, totally different. So it's been a learning process for him, but he's a little bit more mature, being a senior, he can, help that out. Only piece of the puzzle that's missing for Will Howard is the deep ball.
Right.
And throwing more vertical routes. And he's starting to get into it. If he throws more vertical routes on Saturday, oh my gosh. Because, he just has to get used to throwing those deep balls earlier instead of hanging on to the ball. But he's been a great dealer of the football. Number one, taking care of it. And number two, just putting the ball. Sometimes, he has a tendency to underthrow some balls because of the talent. He doesn't, his arm strength isn't strong. But I'll compare him to Craig Krenzel. I said he doesn't have to be Justin Fields or C.J. Stroud or Dwayne Haskins, Cardale Jones. He doesn't have to, or even J.T. Barrett. Be Craig Krenzel. Just manage the game. Just get the ball in the right guy's hands at the right time, and you're gonna get a whole lot of credit for it for a long, long time.
Win a national
you
championship.
Craig Krenzel's name, you think of winner. He's a
That's
national
right.
championship winner. So Will Howard can be in that atmosphere by just dealing the ball. You're going to get credit. You're going to be great. But, hey, hand the ball off to Travion and Krishan, just like Krenzel handed the ball to Maurice Clarett and got out the way. Same thing can happen. And, I love the way Will Howard is playing. And, he doesn't get rattled. And he knows it's a lot of talent in his quarterback room. So he had to come in there, be ready to play. So it's the most talented team he's ever been on. And I think he's handled it very well. And he's going to make himself some money on Sundays as he continues to do what he's doing this year. Somebody would draft him, in the NFL roster. I'm not saying he's going to be your day one starter in the NFL, but the way he's playing, he's helped himself out immensely, to be a mid to late round draft pick.
Absolutely. Keith, you never lost to Michigan in the shoe. How much added pressure is there on this team to defend that home stadium against the Wolverines?
Oh, I wouldn't say it's added pressure, but it is pressure. And you don't want to see them celebrate on your field and, they running around with the flag and all that stuff they did a couple years ago trying to plant it. You don't want to see that, not in your home stadium. So it is a little bit more pressure, absolutely. But the biggest pressure is just beating them and having that on your on your checklist, to-do list, that I beat Michigan while I was at Ohio State. That's what you want to be. I was fortunate to do it as a freshman, and some of these guys you got some freshmen on the opportunity, like Jeremiah Smith. He doesn't know about the last 3 years, so he can start his career off the right way, like I did with a victory, over that team up north.
All right, last thing on the way out. Again, College Football Hall of Famer, Buckeye Hall of Famer Keith Byars hanging out with us here today. Last thing on the way out, Keith, you have rivalries like Duke, North Carolina, Alabama, Auburn. I mean, there's rivalries throughout the entire sports landscape. Why Ohio State, Michigan? They call it the greatest rivalry in all of sports. Why this matchup? Why this rivalry? Why is this the biggest rivalry in all of sports? You've played in it. You know all the history of it. Why is this deemed the biggest rivalry in all of sports?
Well, for a lot of reasons. One of them is it's a long rivalry. There are longer rivalries out there, but it's the best rivalry. And most rivalries are only that week, or that or on game day. The Yankees and Red Sox, they play 12 times a year or something like that. Duke, North Carolina, they play twice a year. Only thing comes close to Ohio State. I mean, Army. Auburn, Alabama. Nobody knows. That's a regional rivalry. Nobody knows about that, the Steel Bowl up here in Ohio. But the closest thing that comes to Ohio State in Michigan is Army Navy. And then that's only for 3 hours on a game day, because it's the military deal. And if you're Army, you're all Army. Navy, you're all Navy. But as soon as the game over, hey, we're one country, because we need each other. We need the Army and the Navy, the Air Force, Marines, all that good stuff. But Ohio State, Michigan, it never ends. It's not just Ohio State, Michigan week. I remember one time in maybe about 10 years ago, and it was around the census time, and they was like, well, people from Ohio turned in more census than people from Michigan. I'm like, really? So we went up. I was like, it's everything. It's all little things. When you meet somebody, where you from? I'm from Michigan. Oh, you from Michigan? You don't cheer for that team, do you? So whether you're sports related, so all those things add to the lore of being in Ohio State, Michigan. It's not in between. It's either or. It's either us or them. Can't be both.
All right, Keith Byars, College Football Hall of Famer, Buckeye Hall of Famer. Awesome enough to give us some time today. Keith, appreciate you as always. We'll talk soon. Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. My pleasure. You guys have a great day, and go Bucks.
Go Bucks.
All right, good stuff.